Hello and welcome to St Michael's Hill. Today you've joined me on a video that's going to be updating this Lima Class 31 locomotive. You might be able to see, those keen-eyed amongst you, that there has been a bit of work done to this loco already. So when I bought this, it was second-hand on eBay, and I didn't really buy it thinking that anything had gone on in terms of work. It was just I was looking for a Class 31, and this came up and it seemed like a good price for a model that was kind of not in the best of conditions, but I thought I could kind of do a bit of work to it. When I received it, I kind of just put it aside really and didn't think too much of it until I came to do the project and found that some work had already been done to it. As you can see, there are some handrails that have been kind of fitted. Now these are a little bit thick for my liking, and are the wrong colour. They're kind of a brass kind of colour. They probably should be silver. We've had a high intensity headlamp has been added as well. That's something that I haven't done, but that's actually quite good. It's something that's very it's prototypical for the locomotive, number 31439, so that's good. It kind of does a bit of work for me. The other thing that you might be able to see is the fan on the top has been redone with kind of an etched version. It's not done perfectly. It's kind of a little bit raised, but I think it's not too bad. I think certainly on this side it's a little bit better, but generally it's already been done and looks good. There is also some dodgy weathering that I've tried to remove, but around the exhausts it's still pretty heavy, so that's something that I need to look at a bit later on. The windows, or the glazing, has been removed from the centre of the unit, and what is left up in the front is the original Lima glazing with the kind of painted on windscreen wipers. Here is one end of the locomotive that I have already detailed. It definitely needs some touching up. Certainly the paint on the buffers needs a second coat. Also, you might be able to see that the sockets here, they will fit directly into this hole that I've had cut out, but to remove the body from the chassis I've undone those, so that will go back in there at some point. The other additions that I've made, we've got the handrails that have been added to the front here, have been painted yellow. Not massively happy with the colour, but that probably will kind of be hidden away quite a lot during the weathering process. There's also another handrail that goes in front of the front window, and a couple of little nodules that stick out from the nose there. So that is the work that has been done. Plus, obviously, I've fitted all the pipes and all that sort of stuff down the front here. So I'm going to be doing that to the other end. I have fitted handrails to the side that are a bit thinner. You can see actually how much thinner they are than the old holes that were left, that are quite noticeable. I'm not actually massively happy with the railings that are there. They're not straight enough, and I'd used brass colour wire as well, when in reality probably a slightly thicker silver wire would have been better. So I'm going to redo those, and then I'm going to do similar things down the other end, although I won't add the buffer beam detailing, as a coupling is going to be installed, so I'll be able to for it to pull a train. I have picked up a bogie that has a NEM coupling already attached. So this is from the new Class 31 from Hornby, so it should be a fairly good match, although I have a feeling that it isn't going to be quite that easy. So I might need to do a little bit of modification there. The other thing I will be doing at this end is adding a cab section. So I've again got a couple of bits from Peter's Spares that I'll kind of be putting together to form a cab that I can just pop a driver in there, and that will kind of finish that bit off quite nicely. Final thing I'll be doing is weathering the loco, to kind of cover up some of that dirt and all that. Oh, sorry, cover up some of those dodgy paintwork, although I think the black will certainly be given a second coat before I do, but it should cover up some of the differences on the wiring and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm going to be doing. The first thing that I will need to do at the other end is work on the buffer beam. So I'm going to cut off the buffers that are there, drill out the holes, and then insert some new sprung buffers. These again have been picked up from Peter's Spares, so kind of just use those. Again, I'll paint the shafts of them black as per the prototype. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take the body off of the chassis. I'm going to then take off any of the wiring, remove the glazing and all that sort of stuff that I need to do. So it's quite a simple job with the Class 31s. There's just a couple of clips that will be able to remove the body. So I'll do that quickly now. Let's see if I can do this on camera. So it's just a couple of clips down here. And the body then comes away quite easily. And what's left behind is the chassis with the buffer unit. So I will use all the buffer beam detailings that go straight onto here, but I'm going to work on the body shell to start with. So like I said, I'm not too happy with the railings on the end that I've already done, so I'll remove those. It's quite a simple job really of just getting the tweezers in, prising up the wire and then pulling it out, so it's not too difficult at all. It's almost like under a paper clip. Just pull that through and do the same at the other end. The handrail will come out easily like that. So I'm going to do that for the rest of them. Down the other end it's slightly more difficult. The wires are a lot thicker and have been put in a lot more firmly, but you should be able to get those off, and ultimately if I need to I can just cut the wire on the other side and just pull out from that way. As you can see as well, they go through the glazing unit, so even if I was going to keep the glazing, that probably would cause a few problems, so I'm going to be replacing that with flush glazing anyway, so I will also remove that glazing piece at the same time. I've now removed all the handrails that were there before. You can see really the difference in the gauge of the wire. I'm going to be a lot happier when that's been redone with the kind of silver wire. So I picked up this other wire at Eileen's. She's at most of the exhibitions and is really great. So picked up that for, I think this was about £1 or £1.30 or something like that. Should be enough to do all of the Loco. For the super fine wire at the front, I still will use the brass wire that I was using. It's a little bit more difficult to work with. It's a little bit more bendy, but at the same time, I think for the detail on the front, it's pretty important to do that. Before I carry on going into this detailing project, it's would only be right to give kind of credit where it's due. A lot of the inspiration for me actually doing this came from looking at John Batley's Facebook page. He's recently done 4 or 5, I think, Class 31s, Lima versions that he's done, and I actually spoke to him about kind of how he does it, and obviously he's put up guides on how to do it. So the method here is very much based on his methods. Do check him out. His versions are probably far better than this one's going to end up being, but I just wanted to give credit to John for that, and for taking the time to speak to me. It's been very good of you. But yeah, certainly check out what he's doing. His 31s are really, really good. And the photography he gets of them after they've been done is just insane. They look so real. I'll leave a link in the description below, so do make sure you check him out. Anyway, the next thing that we need to do to get the body in the right condition is quite a simple one really. Where the handrails have been kind of moulded on, I just want to remove those. It's going to allow me to then drill a small hole with this pin vise to start kind of the wire work. So I'm going to just get a sharp scalpel and slowly just remove that, carve that back so it's flush with the bodywork, and then it can be given a quick sand. Although obviously the more you sand, the more this is going to kind of remove the body shell side of things. In terms of paint, I think this yellow is actually just the moulded plastic. That's why it looks a little bit plasticky, I suppose, but once that's been given a weather, it's not going to be too much of a problem. So just go careful with the scalpel blade and remove just as much as you need to on the handrails. Everything else on the front of the body is going to stay as it is. So with a small pin vise, I've now drilled holes at the end of where the old moulded handrails were. I've also drilled the 2 holes at the top of here that are going to have a piece of wire on them. It's pretty much all the drilling that's required on the main model. As you know, the holes were already drilled here, so if you were going to attach your own handrails, you could just drill a small hole in there. But other than that, everything that I need to drill is all done. The next thing I'm going to do is get all the wire pieces ready. It's a fairly simple job, although it can be a bit time consuming. The wire is just simply bent into place. To get the right angles, I tend to use tweezers, but you can certainly use pliers or something, and simply just grip the wire, and then you can simply bend it, and it gives you a fairly nice kind of right angle. And like I say, just go careful. Obviously with these railings, you want them to be kind of straight as possible. Once you've got the first right angle bend in, you can just place the wire into the hole and then just mark on the, or hold the piece of wire where it needs to be. You can make your next bend from there. Simply, it's just a case then of bending the wire to be in the correct shape and passing it through the holes that you've created, and it'll give you something like that. Once that's in place, you can kind of then hold it still and bend the wire around the back like that. So you can just bend these wires and it should hold everything in place quite nicely, which leaves you with a kind of handrail like that. Obviously, the straighter it can be, the better, and try and get those right angles nice and crisp. But you can see already that it's going to make a fair bit of difference. So I'm going to now do that to the other wires on the front and the ones also on the side, where I'll be using the silver wire. I will give the wire on the front a paint, so I'm not going to kind of fix them all in place. I will kind of lightly prime them and then give them a coat of yellow for the nose section and a black for just above. I might even just use a black primer on that wire just to kind of keep it all nice and painted and ready for weathering. So I'll do all that and I'll show you where I am after that. So all the wires are now in place. As you can see, they kind of they look a lot better than what was there before. 31's got a slightly interesting front handrail on the door. It's just got a bit of a kink at the top of it, so I've tried to kind of recreate that as best I can. Quite happy with how those have gone on, and again the front ones are looking pretty good too. Just going to paint those up and then fix them in place. Whilst I'm waiting for the handrails and everything from the front to dry, I'm going to fit the glazing. So I'm using just a flush glazing, and there are various companies that offer this. It's just a simple case of you get a sheet of kind of the windows that you just cut out and then use a bit of glue and glaze or something similar to fit them in place. So I've already done it at this end. As you can see, it's a lot better than what was there before, and it doesn't have any of the horrible kind of painted on windscreen wipers or anything like that. So I'm going to do that for the rest of the unit, including the middle windows. Once that's done, I'll be ready to kind of paint and get the handrails back in position, ready for some final touches on the bodywork before I start to look to weather it. Here are the glazing sheets. As you can see, it's pretty simple. You just cut around the outside of the window and then it pushes in from the inside, so it fills up the spot. Leave a mil or two around the edge just to allow the glue to have something to stick to, but fairly easy. These are the windows for the middle section, and then the cab windows come on a piece that looks like this. Now inserted the glazing into the openings. That's pretty much it now until the handrails have been painted, which they're still dry. I'm just giving them a second coat It's quite tricky with the wires to get the paint to adhere, but once that's done, the only other thing that needs to be done is the little fins that are going to stick out of the nose in this sort of area here. It's just going to be made from tiny little bits of plasticard cut into kind of small kind of rectangular triangles, and basically put in place with a little bit of glue painted black. As you can see on the other end here, very, very minimal, but you can certainly pick them up just in front of the window there. Once that's all put together, I'm going to call the body done, and then we'll just be able to give it a bit of a weathering, and I'll move on to the chassis and fitting the buffers to the other end. The little plastic fins are now in place, and as you can see, before they're painted, they're a little bit more obvious. But yeah, very, very tiny, very, very fiddly. Just get them on with whatever glue you can. I've used some rapid bond rather than super glue, and then when I paint it, I'll kind of make sure that any kind of gaps are filled and just use the paint as a little bit of an adhesive as well. So once that's painted and the railings are in place, the work on the body has been completed. I will leave this fan as it is. I think, like I said at the beginning, it's not bad, so I'll probably leave that as it is, and hopefully yeah, we'll be able to go from there. I'll just get that all in place, and then it'll be time for some weathering. Now that the body's complete, let's start to work on the chassis. First thing we need to do is just remove this other buffer. Just pulls away. Keep hold of those, they can be useful for kind of decorating kind of scenes, and I'm certainly going to use some in the depot that you see behind you. The next thing I need to do to prepare the area for the sprung buffers is to basically saw off the buffer shank that's there, and then sand down all of the coupling and things like that that aren't going to be used. Certainly that's what I did at the front, where I'm going to have a lot of those pipes. As the back is not going to have the pipe, so it can be coupled to another Loco or a wagon easily, I'm probably going to leave the cosmetic bits and pieces in place. They don't look great, but like I said, probably better that than having nothing at all. So I'm just going to saw the buffer shanks off, and then drill a slightly larger hole and place these ones in, and that'll be that really on the back of this one. On the front, when I was working on that, obviously the buffer beam was kind of sanded down, and then I drilled various holes to allow all the detailing parts to be put on. By memory, I used a Helljan 47 pack just for all the buffer beams and buffer beam detailing and all that sort of stuff, but there are various options, including some 3D printed ones that are now available that you can use instead. So plenty of options out there. I think as well you can even get the buffer beam detailing parts from Peter Spares for a class 31, so well worth kind of doing. So I'm going to get that done, and then the chassis will be complete. Then there's just a little bit more work to do on the bogies, and then the chassis and bogies will be ready for weathering as well. So I've now fitted the sprung buffers. Simple case of using a pin vise again to kind of drill a hole. This was slightly too small, so I used a tapered file just to open up the gap just wide enough to plant the buffers in. As you can see, they're nice and sprung. So that now is pretty much how that end is going to look. I'm going to give the buffers a coat of black paint, and whilst I'm there, I'm going to touch up the ones at the other end as they're a little bit chipped away. Then it's just going to be a case of working on the bogies. Just need to put in some sand pipes using the brass wire again. Once that's done, I will then weather up the chassis and the bogies together, and then I will add the body shell on top and start weathering that. Hopefully that will leave us with a complete model. When it comes to work on the bogie, it's probably easier just to show you here what I'm going to be doing. So where the moulded sand pipe here is, Just going to remove that, and then I'm going to replace it with a wire one that's going to be more in line with the wheels, just for a little bit more kind of prototypical detail. Not too worried about the colour on that because they'll be heavily weathered anyway, so that's not a problem. So I'll just use the thinner brass wire, get that into position, and go from there. So I've painted up the buffer shanks now, and also put the wires back on and painted the little fins. So everything's pretty much done now on the body and the chassis, apart from the work on the bogies, which I'm going to look into now. Simple job really on the bogies is to remove the moulded on sandpipes, which are down here. They're not in line with the wheels, and then replace them with some little wire ones. So that's the last thing that needs to be done, and then I can get the body back on and get it all weathered. At the moment it's literally just sat on the top here. So I'll get done with that, and then I will get back to you. So you can see here what I'm doing with the sandpipes. It's a case of removing what's already there, so removing these moulded ones, and then drilling into the sandbox itself with the pin vise and just placing the wire in there. That'll just be painted a matte black, and then ready to go. So I've done that on all 4 corners. I need to do that on the other bogie as well. Once that's done, everything is ready for weathering. I've now given the Loco some weathering. I used a weathered black for the roof to really kind of darken that up. And the underframe I've used a bit of brake dust and also some frame dirt to kind of bring out some of the detail down there. I've also used that on the front a little bit, so quite pleased with that. Just while that dries overnight, I'm going to be working a little bit on getting the cab sorted out. That's pretty much the last thing that needs to go on, plus the windscreen wipers, which I've kind of got ready here. Tiny little things, so they'll be placed in situ on the Loco, and then I will probably remove the mask hole from the front windows and replace that with some masking tape in the kind of shape of the windscreen wipers, just to kind of get that effect. But then the Loco is pretty much going to be finished. There is more work that needs to be done. Obviously, I'm going to be remotoring it. Probably at the very least I'll be DCC chipping it so it's ready for use on the layout, but I'm not going to show you that. I've certainly done that before in other videos, so if you are interested in how that's done, then I'll link to one of those videos in the description below. So I'll get back to you once the model's had its windscreen wipers fitted and has been given a coat of matte varnish, and then it'll be ready for the layout. So there we go, that's ready now for its varnish. I used glue and glaze in the end to get the wipers on. They're very, very fiddly. Still a little blob dry in there, but hopefully 1 drop will be enough on the edges. If not, I will maybe add another drop at the other end just to kind of hold it in place, but hopefully that'll be enough. So gonna hit this with some matte varnish now, and once that's done, I'll remove the maskle from the rest of the windows, and then at that point I'm just ready to fit the cab, and then I'll be calling it done. So here we are, the finished model. Very, very happy with how it's come out. The weathering is fairly subtle on most of the kind of Loco. I've given the roof a good going over, mainly because the colour was completely wrong to begin with, but the underframe is quite subtle, and the Loco looks like it's in a fairly good working order. So very, very pleased with how this has come out. The one thing that I haven't been able to do is get the cab fitted in. It just seems that it's a very, very different kind of shape to this. So I'm going to have to look at something else for that, but it gives me a little bit of a project to finish off when I'm adding a DCC decoder and possibly remotoring it. The only other thing that would be great to have, and right now I think it's probably beyond what I want to do, both in terms of my experience levels and skill level, but also cost, is add lighting to the Loco. I think it would look very, very good with kind of full kind of lighting on it. But apart from that, very, very happy with kind of how it's looking. Both ends of the Loco have been given a bit more detailing. and yeah, generally a lot happier with it. I will be adding a coupling at this end at some point as well, just kind of an NEM one, and probably put a long KD in there or something to kind of bridge the fairly big gap between the front of the bogie and the buffers on a Class 31. But yeah, overall, very happy with how it's come out. And a really exciting project. So I actually have a few kind of leftover bits for this. When I first went out to do this, I kind of bought the fan from Shoreplan that was already installed. So I have that, and also some glazing, another full set of glazing from Laser Glaze that I don't need anymore. So I put them on my eBay channel. So if this video has inspired you, then head over to the link in the description below. Hopefully you can pick up those bits at a bargain and try it yourself. Once more, full credit in terms of the inspiration and the method goes to John Batley. Again, check out his link in the description below. And I hope this has kind of inspired some of you to kind of have a go at messing around with some old Lima Locos. They really are, or some of them really are, kind of great models, great shape. Just need a bit of work on the detailing. So I hope that I've shown that anyone can do that, really. So thank you very much for joining me this week on St Michael's Hill, and I will see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.